It has been known for a while that when George Lucas wrote Star Wars, the original Star Wars, from the very start he planned on having 3 separate trilogies. Obviously, whatever he wrote back in 1976 was a mere draft with tons of details missing. That would have to be fleshed out later in the development process. As time went on, George worked on these drafts, and before selling Lucasfilm to Disney, he did in fact also share his ideas for a sequel trilogy, hoping that Disney will somehow adapt it. Disney chose to do their own thing, and up to this day, we know very little about what George had planned. Some minor things surfaced eventually, such as the name Kira, and that Vader's grandchildren were to play a major role in the narrative. Nothing major until now. A new behind-the-scenes book was recently released, entitled The Star Wars Archives. Made in close collaboration with George Lucas and Lucasfilm, the second volume covers the making of the prequel trilogy. The first volume was released back in 2018 and covered the making of the original trilogy. In the second, more recent book, there is a brief interview with Lucas in which he reveals some of his plans for the sequel trilogy. Apparently Darth Maul was to be the main villain of it. Makes you wonder if Lucas wanted to bring him back to life in the Clone Wars because of that. Was that the plan all along? Maul was to train Darth Talon, who is a Legends character. It was already revealed a while back by Pablo Hidalgo, member of the Lucasfilm Story Group, that Darth Talon was in George's treatments for the sequel trilogy. Darth Talon appeared for the first time in Legacy series comics all the way back in 2006. John Ostrander, along with Jan Duursema, wrote the story of these comics. I am not sure if we will ever find out how closely they worked with George, but I'm guessing they did their own thing and Lucas didn't really care too much. Perhaps he liked the design of the character so much. Darth Talon is indeed very reminiscent of Maul, that later on he wanted to reuse it for his own trilogy. Anyhow, Talon was meant to be the new Darth Vader, and Maul was meant to mirror the Emperor, and the two of them would act as the core antagonists of this new trilogy. Given how Maul took control of the crime underworld all the way back in the Clone Wars, after the Empire's fall, he'd used the chaos that ensued to take control of the galaxy. I do wonder if Lawrence Kasdan wanted to utilize the pieces of this in his Han Solo movie. I'd say the answer is no, since we know Maul was added later on in the development process of Solo. But if the Solo sequel does ever happen, in whatever shape it may be, I think that is where we might see some inspiration taken from George's treatment of the sequel trilogy. Since the main focus of the Solo sequel, other than Han Solo obviously, was meant to be this big crime syndicate war. It does make a lot of sense actually when you think about it, and ties everything together quite nicely. Leia is trying to rebuild the Republic, much like in both Legends and canon. Maul is her main obstacle. As for Luke, his main focus is rebuilding the Jedi, which obviously makes sense given Yoda's line in Return of the Jedi: "Pass on what you have learned." In both Legends and canon, Luke also tried to rebuild the Jedi Order. If I'm being honest, Lucas is being quite vague in this interview, and doesn't really go into much detail on how Luke would perhaps interact with Maul, if at all, if perhaps Leia would be the one to stop him, or her children, or Luke's. Anyhow, by the end of the trilogy, Luke would have succeeded in rebuilding the Jedi, and Leia would have become the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. Obviously, we'd probably see a lot of other new characters pop up, along with absolute fan favorites such as Han Solo. Plus, Leia's children, and perhaps even Luke's, would be of some significance. The most interesting thing about what Lucas revealed in the interview is that Leia ends up being the Chosen One, whatever that means. She renews the Republic, the New Republic now, and brings balance to the Force in the process. I think there is a chance this might have been paraphrased wrongly, or Lucas simply omitted some crucial details, since I doubt he'd contradict the prophecy of the Chosen One. He was always very adamant about Anakin being the Chosen One, that despite his fall, he was meant to bring back the balance all along. That is what the Mortis trilogy was all about. What do you guys think about all this? Do you think Lucas's sequel trilogy would have been better received than the one we got? I mean, one would think anything would have received a better reception than The Last Jedi, but hey, prequels got their fair share of hate too, back in the day. Let me know in the comments below, and may the Force be with you, always.